The entire Gospel of Mark reads like someone confessing without confessing. It reads like a man trying to hide himself inside his own memories. You can see the seams everywhere. You can see the fear. You can see the coded movement. You can see the gaps that only make sense if the man writing it lived through it. And once you remove the later church rewriting, and the stupid added ending, and the resurrection garbage, the thing stands there naked. It is the report of an extraction. It is the account of a man taken down alive. Not a divine event. Not a miracle. A recovery operation. And every line in the earliest text screams it. Start with the centurion. Rome did not fuck around with crucifixions. They killed men professionally. They knew the signs of death. They knew when a man was gone. But in Mark, the centurion is shocked. The text literally gives you the surprise. This only works if the man on the cross was not dead. And if he was not dead, then the so-called permission to remove the body was not what the church said it was. It was a controlled handoff. Pilate wanted this out of public sight. Pilate did not want a Roman citizen dying under his watch. The political blowback would have been lethal. So he played dumb. He washed his hands. He signed the release. And he got the problem off the public stage before Rome looked incompetent. This is political survival, 100%. Now comes the detail the churches pretend is nothing. Roman soldiers guarding a tomb. That is the stupidest idea in the entire New Testament. Rome did not post elite soldiers in front of rotting corpses. That is fiction written by fools. But Rome absolutely posted soldiers to guard political assets. You guard a living problem, not dead meat. So the reason soldiers are there is because the thing inside was not a corpse. The soldiers were not watching for tomb robbers. They were keeping witnesses away from a man being treated and hidden. That is exactly how political extractions are done. You create a false location. You isolate it. You make sure no one approaches. And you move the living target through the back. Now look at the ending. Mark ends with fear. Silence. Running away. No appearances. No triumphant Jesus eating fish or poking holes in his hands. Just an empty place, and the women being told nothing but a direction to Galilee. The oldest manuscripts end exactly there. That is the behavior of people who find a place where a man should have been but is not. They saw nothing because there was nothing to see. They fled because they realized the situation was political fire. That is not resurrection literature. That is panic literature. It is exactly what you write when you know someone has been moved out of sight. The linen cloth boy. The weirdest untheological moment in the entire book. He appears out of nowhere. He is wearing nothing but a linen cloth. He gets grabbed. He runs off naked. It serves no doctrinal purpose. No church ever taught it. No theology ever used it. It is there because the writer remembered it and could not help leaving it in. It is an autobiographical leak. It is someone present at the extraction. He was wearing a ritual garment or a simple wrap. Someone tried to seize him. He slipped out. He ran. This is eyewitness memory. Not myth. Not allegory. Raw memory. Now take the so-called physician. Luke is not a Macedonian name. But Mark is. The early tradition splits the character. They turn the doctor who treated the man into a separate saint. They disconnect him from the writer. This is how cover stories are built. You take the trait. You turn it into another character. You remove the connection to the real man. Jesus was called the great physician because the real man healed bodies and repaired people. So the title gets ripped off him and stuck onto the fictional companion of Paul. But if Paul is Simon and Simon is the man who wrote Mark, then it makes sense. The physician is the same man who wrote the gospel, and the doctor who treated the crucified man is the same man who lived through the event. Now look at the narrative speed. Mark moves like someone remembering, not like someone inventing. The quick jumps, the abrupt transitions, the strange blank spots, the geographical errors, the time gaps. All of that is classic autobiographical concealment. A man trying to tell his own story without exposing himself. A man who lived two identities. A man who had to hide who he was because Rome nearly killed him once, and he was not about to hand them a second chance. Now put the political piece back in. If the man was a Roman citizen, the entire mess becomes obvious. A Roman citizen cannot be legally executed without trial and full process. Pilate's wife appears in later tradition because someone with power stepped in. The early Samaritan and Syrian traditions preserve a woman named Helena involved in high political affairs. She is the one who could have pushed Pilate to pull the man down. You do not get that kind of intervention for a random preacher. You get that for someone with political value. So here is the real shape. The man crucified was not dead. He was removed alive. He was taken to medical care. He was hidden by Rome to avoid backlash. His followers thought he died because they saw the execution start, but not the removal. They found an empty place. They fled in fear. Then later writers turned the extraction into a resurrection story because it made better propaganda for the new Roman religion that grew out of the wreckage. That is why the earliest ending is empty. That is why there is no body. That is why there is no appearance. That is why the whole thing reads like a man whispering his own survival under a layer of metaphor. And once you accept that Mark is not theology, but the coded diary of a man who survived an execution, every other piece falls into place. The letters of Paul, the tone, the urgency, the way he talks about his body, the way he talks about wounds, the way he talks about dying and rising metaphorically, the way he speaks with the authority of someone who has lived several identities. Paul is Simon. Jesus is Simon in narrative form. The great physician is Simon. The trifecta is one man in three roles, because he survived once as Jesus, then resurfaced as Paul to continue his work, and then his followers preserved his memory as Simon. Mark is not scripture. Mark is not myth. Mark is not history in the way churches pretend. Mark is an extraction report written by the man who lived through the extraction and encoded his identity and story, because telling the truth plainly would have ended his life. In Mark 14 verse 32, the so-called Gethsemane scene is Simon writing about himself splitting his own identity into the teacher who knows and the disciples who sleep, a literary device showing the inner conflict of a man who already knows he will not die because he is a Roman citizen who must stage a public arrest to satisfy the mob. The whole passage is a coded setup for the transfer to Roman custody, not a supernatural agony scene, and every line exposes that the writer expects survival rather than martyrdom. Mark 14 verses 43 through 52 shows the staged arrest where the crowd with clubs plays the public theater while the real transfer happens under Roman authority, proven by the bizarre detail of the young man fleeing naked, which is Simon's signature autobiographical marker, showing he slips out of the scene alive. From that point on, the narrative keeps splitting into a public execution story for the mob and a private survival story for insiders.
Veritas lux maya, truth is my life.